U.S. President Donald Trump has hit the pause button for tariffs on most countries for 90 days. But here's the catch. These nations will still be taxed at a 10% rate on imports, with Chinese goods levied by as much as 125%. The 3-month suspension on tariffs will also be used as time to conduct negotiations. If anything, the American president's U-turn or about-turn could only prolong the uncertainty of how much the tariffs really are and how long they will be in place. This also gives Trump the opportunity to turn the trade war heat on China, while at the same time ease some fears on the home front that the U.S. is headed into recession. As for Potos, well, he's not the least bothered with the turmoil caused by his on-again, off-again tariffs. For him, this shows the flexibility of his leadership, and Trump says he's not done yet.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippee, you know. No other president would have done what I did, and it had to be done. China was by far the biggest abuser in history, and others also, but somebody had to do it. You have to have flexibility. I could say, here's a wall, and I'm going to go through that wall. You know, look, nothing's over yet, but we have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. They're proud people.
Bank of the Philippine Islands lead economist Neri worries that the tariffs imposed by the U.S. could dampen industrial output and slow gross domestic product growth. We now talk to BPI SVP and lead economist Neri. Good evening and welcome to The Big Story. Tell us about your worries, because most of those we've talked to on the show, at least, have indicated that it's not much of a problem. For the Philippines, at least.
Yeah, good evening to you and your viewers, ladies. Yeah, we're worried about a lot of risks that can happen. We're concerned about how all of these tariffs will actually end, and whether the Philippines can really cope with all of these challenges. No? Of course, number one is, as we had written in our write-up, very quickly prepared, is it's going to affect key industries directly. Those who sell to the U.S., be it electronics exporters, food manufacturers, or even raw agricultural product sellers, are of course going to be the ones affected directly if the new tariffs will make it more difficult for Americans to spend on them. So those are the direct risks that we're watching very closely. And again, we made a very rough estimate that since our exports are around 2.6% of our GDP. Let's say 1/4 of that isn't able to enter the U.S. market anymore in 2025, then that would account for about 0.5% of GDP. You know? So instead of growing by 6.3% as we projected this year, we should end up at around 5.8%. So, but we're happy that there has been a suspension of 90 days, and this should translate to a smaller impact on our negative impact on our economic growth, and fewer industries are going to be affected negatively.
This reprieve of 90 days, we shouldn't be misled by it, right? I mean, should not make us relax, but rather plan about the impact of the reciprocal tariffs on the Philippines.
Of course, anytime in the next 90 days, Mr. Trump can just,
change his mind again.
Oh yeah, change his mind. Press the play button. After pressing pause, he will continue with it. That's something we cannot rule out. It's something we need to prepare for. And again, I think it's very important. It was mentioned by your previous guest that we be prepared in the negotiations with the United States, just like every other country is preparing. Because this might actually be an opportunity for us to carry out reforms in our country in the need to meet some of the conditions of the U.S. If it will mean cutting corruption, for example, because the USTR has identified corruption as one of the reasons why the U.S. should be implementing higher tariffs on the Philippines. They could not sell their products. Their products could not get through our country because of corruption and all of these inefficiencies, lack of infrastructure. So if our negotiators are forced to ask our our lawmakers, our leaders, the private sector, the public sector, to shape up, no, so that we can meet the conditions that the U.S. asks and not have to suffer from higher tariffs, then this actually becomes the bright side of Mr. Trump's pressures on using tariffs.
We had Dan La Chica of SAPI last night on our program, and he is not as pessimistic as you are. In fact, he predicts not a probable increase in exports compared to a flat projection for 2025. So why are you worried if he, of the industry itself, doesn't seem, he says, what he says is that a wait and see attitude would be the best option to take?
Well, we're not ruling out a surprise positive outcome from this. No? Many of the folks we hear who are very optimistic cite the fact that we are being punished with lower tariffs than everybody else. And this should translate to diversion of trade towards the Philippines and more investments being carried out here in our country, since we are able to sell it at a much more reasonable price to the United States. But, to a large extent, some of this could be wishful thinking. It's good to hope for these things, but in the short term, will definitely be some adjustments need to be done, that have to be done. For example, moving plants away from Vietnam to the Philippines or from some other country to the Philippines, that will take a lot of time studying how to set things up and whether we are competitive enough to make up for the tariff differential. If the tariff differential is 20%, our energy costs combined with the cost of doing business, combined with the ease of doing business. Now you have to get all of these permits from barangays and all over, so many things. Whereas if you go to Vietnam, you only have a one-stop shop to deal with. If an investor weighs all of these things, our advantage might actually not be there at all. Yes, it can be cancelled, offset by all of these negatives. No? So again, hopefully it will help us shape up, but we can't really expect big improvements to happen in the short term. And it's better to really be prepared for to have the contingencies necessary to keep the economy going. And it's good that we have a strong domestic economy. It's a big advantage, I think.
Well, June, it seems only economists are a little bit worried because, like you said, and just like the White House said, this period, this 90-day pause, it could be, the period for negotiations. And in fact, we saw Vietnam scramble right away, get in touch with the White House. A bunch of other countries, we saw how the Singaporean Prime Minister reacted. And he was actually warning of second-round effects. Again, they only were slapped with 10% and we 17%. And yet, he is warning that it's actually the New World Order. It's like a modern economics. It's that reorg that he's afraid of. With this pause, would it be more evident, you say, that China is really the target here? And does that make us safe? And what about the second round effects that we could still face a recession, a worldwide recession?
Yeah, so again, the 10% is still there. And 10% we think is higher than what we deserve. Our equivalent tariff to the US is only around, in our estimate, 7%. So 10 is actually, it's not going to help us much. So 17, of course, is worse. No? But for all other countries, 10 is actually quite high. For some, like maybe India, it's not much of a difference. No? But for us, it's actually not favorable. So again, we'll be able to penetrate the U.S. market continuously if Americans will now have to pay 10% more on products that come from our country. They can go to Ecuador for bananas. They can go for other countries that have substitutes of what we produce and reject all of our exports altogether sometime in the near term. So that pause button doesn't really provide complete relief. Of course, a little bit of relief. And again, something that we should be watching more closely. So economists don't sleep anymore at night,
Yeah,
Sean, no?
I
Because
know.
of all of these challenges. No? And on the other concern that you had, what was the second one again,
The second
Sean?
one was that a lot of people see this as a room for negotiation. That's also what the White House press officer was saying. You know, a lot of countries have called us, and we expect that in these 90 days, habang nakapos, ay mag-uusap kami. I'm just worried na parang, do we have someone negotiating? Parang everyone's so chill here. I could be wrong. I wish I was wrong. And also, you know, like, what do you think the government should be doing? Should we be pursuing like a free trade agreement? That's what Dan Lachica of SAPI was saying. He's been saying it since 2018.
Yeah, well, Secretary Roque and Secretary Go, they're the ones who are really dedicating their time and resources to put together a negotiating position on the side of the Philippines. No? And again, it has to have the support of our lawmakers. It has to have the support of the private sector. No? And that's why I see this, a bit of a positive thing for the Philippines if it will push us to move faster in our reform programs, improve education, improve the ease of doing business, build up our infrastructure more efficiently. Then it becomes a blessing, actually. All of these pressure coming from Mr. Trump, aside from lower oil prices that we are now enjoying, and all of the other decline in commodity prices, the price of rice continuing to go down. If all these positive factors fall in place, then it should be, again, hopeful for us to see improvements. But we have to strengthen our position and make sure it's something that's supported by all of these stakeholders, Sean.
All right. June Neri, we do hope you have a good night's sleep tonight. Thank you so much, Senior
Yeah,
Vice
not for
President.
another 90 days. Yeah, not even the next 90 days.
Senior Vice President and Lead Economist of BPI.